Lots of storylines coming down today from the Combine. It's Dukes and Bell, Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. Atlanta, we got a lot of work to do, man. A lot of things to figure out this offseason. Jake Asman, he is with ESPN and Mad Dog Radio. He's live from the Combine in Indianapolis. So, Jake, obviously, you know, coach is speaking today. There was a lot said. Our coach, our general manager up there speaking. What do you get the sense, and I want to start here because it's been such a big topic with the Bears and what they're going to do. What do you get the sense they're going to do with Justin Fields? They didn't come out today and say they were trading him outright, but they said if they did, they'd move him fairly quickly. Do you feel like that's a done deal even though they're not telling us?
I do, guys. And, you know, it's interesting because I was talking with someone who covers the Bears right before I hopped on with you, and she basically told me, hey, you know, we have a pretty good idea. Like we're gonna know for sure what's happening by the end of this week. So it kind of does feel like, you know, the NFL Combine being all about, you know, the prospects and the draft, but all the business for the NFL kind of really gets started this week as far as free agents and trades. And, you know, with this scenario, you have obviously our draft prospect with Caleb Williams and Justin Fields all kind of coinciding here. So I do think we will get some sort of clarity on that by the end of the week potentially. I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Jake, I know there were some stories written about them talking to the Patriots. And is there any way Chicago can screw this up? Because they've been a rep of being very dysfunctional. This seems like they could really get everything right if they pull this off.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, look, I grew up a fan of a team that also screws everything up in the Jets. So, like, when there's a will, there's a way, guys. So, so yes, I guess they could, but it just feels like there's an obvious decision you make here, right? You obviously can reset the quarterback contract by going out there and taking Caleb number one. You could trade Fields. You start the bidding and see what you could get. Maybe you do him a solid by trying to trade into a place you would prefer if the offers are close. But, I mean, at the end of the day, you know, if you believe in the quarterback you're taking number one, Justin Fields, well, you want to maximize his value, you still have the ninth pick in this year's draft as well. So it's just about moving on, making your decision, having conviction in that decision. So could they screw it up? Of course they could, but I think it's kind of hard to screw up. If you decided Caleb's your guy, then you just move Fields and off we go.
We're talking with Jake Asman, guys, from the Combine in Indy as we get the latest from up there. What about what you heard from Sean Payton today, talking about Russell Wilson? He's another guy we've talked about that may or may not be available. And Sean Payton said, well, we'll figure it out in the next 2 weeks. I mean, they don't know?
Yeah, I mean, come on now. They don't know. They sat him down at the end of the year and basically embarrassed him publicly. And then Russell Wilson, I saw, went on a podcast with Brandon Marshall and is talking about winning, you know, two more Super Bowls over the next 5 years. I would also like to date, you know, Margot Robbie and Sydney Sweeney over the next 5 years. But, I mean, come on now. I mean, Sean Payton could say whatever he says, you know, today. Within 2 weeks we'll have an idea. But I think everyone would be shocked if Russell Wilson is actually back in Denver playing with the Broncos another year.
Jake Asman from ESPN and Mad Dog Radio. By the way, let's get your 2 cents worth because we've talked to everybody, including guys who cover the Broncos. I mean, do you feel that somewhere else he can walk into a locker room and be respected and not treated like the punchline to a joke?
If he plays well, I guess he can, right? I mean, like, winning is the great deodorizer. So I guess you'd have to ask yourself this. If you bring in Russell Wilson, are you bringing him in because you think he could still play at a high level? Can he get a team to the playoffs if the circumstances is right? I mean, there was a stretch last year where he wasn't terrible. They were winning games. He was definitely much better than he was, you know, the previous year under Nathaniel Hackett, which is not a surprise to anyone. But ultimately, if you're a team bringing in Russell Wilson, you got to have conviction that he can still play at at least at a serviceable level, above average level. And if he plays well, I think that's what players care about, coaches care about at the end of the day. If he stinks it up, then all the other stuff with Russ starts to come into play. But I think it truly comes down to what's your evaluation of him as a player. If you think you can win games with him, then yeah, I think you get the respect of the locker room very quickly if he plays well.
You know, a guy that's throwing this week, and I think he needs to impress, I really do, is Michael Penix. And I'm curious to know what you think about him. We've discussed him as a possibility, you know, being drafted here if we stay at 8 and, you know, figuring that nobody makes a move just with the mock drafts. Michael Penix, I think, has to have a really good combine to put himself in the conversation as maybe that fourth quarterback in the first round. I think the first 3 are already taken, right? We know Caleb, we know Drake, and also, you know, Jaden Daniels. I don't know who that fourth guy is. What do you think of Michael Penix?
You know, I'm definitely going to be biased on this because he was nice enough to come on my ESPN New York show a couple of weeks back during Radio Row Week, and I left that being like, damn, man, I'd love the Giants to take him at 6. I'd love the Jets to sit behind Aaron Rodgers. So that's where I'm coming at it. But I enjoyed watching him a lot in college. I think as far as just being a pure pocket accurate quarterback, he's as good as any in his class. I think what concerns you is the age and the 2 ACL injuries that he has suffered. But if you're a team that can look past that and you believe in his ability to throw, and maybe you're a team that has a really good offensive line in place, like I think Atlanta does, then at least you feel like, all right, we could put him in and he could be successful right away. But I think the injury factor, more so than just the combine performance, is something to watch. And I'm sure the medicals, if he gets tested this week like everyone assumes he will, that maybe tells you a lot as far as how teams feel about him.
Speaking of medical, Jake, we saw the video out there. I guess it was on a tennis court, but Kirk Cousins showing good mobility. Should we all assume he's going to stay in Minnesota?
I don't think we could assume that based on some of the reporting coming out of Minnesota that, well, they don't want to give him another fully guaranteed deal. I wonder what the thought process is from a Viking standpoint. They're kind of in no man's land in the draft. With where they're picking a could-go quarterback, maybe they could trade up. If they move on from Kirk, are they in a spot where they look at it and go, well, he's good, but he's coming off this injury. He's not worth paying $45-50 million potentially. I think Minnesota is one of the more interesting teams to watch this offseason because there's a path for them to be a playoff team next year with Kirk Cousins back and Justin Jefferson and all that. And there's also a path for them to maybe enter a rebuild where their offensive-minded coach gets his quarterback to kind of groom going forward. So that's definitely a very intriguing storyline. I don't think he's a lock to go back to Minnesota, though. I'm fascinated to see how that plays out.
Speaking of intriguing storylines, the Bucs say they want to re-sign Mike Evans and have him be a Buck for life. We've heard that line before. What are the odds of it happening that Mike Evans returns? Because they could have got this deal done last season.
They could. Doesn't it feel like there's some negotiating through the media going on right now where, you have the leaks coming out, oh, this is the last day for him to get a deal. Otherwise, the Bucs cap hit will go up to this. And it's like, okay, well, he's not a free agent just yet. It does feel like ultimately there's a deal to be made because I just can't picture him playing for a different franchise. But, I mean, look, if he does hit the open market, there's going to be a lot of teams that are interested. I mean, he's Mr. Reliable. Mr. Reliable. I mean, he's a 1,000-yard receiver every year of his career, and it's not like he's had Brady every year. He's done it with Jameis Winston and Mike Glennon, and this past year with Baker. I mean, what he has done in his career speaks for itself. I can't picture him playing elsewhere, but we get to March 11th and legal tampering starts, and he's available. All it takes is one GM with a lot of money to spend to wow him, and maybe that's the difference.
I think all fantasy owners have projected him to the Kansas City Chiefs for like the last 3 years, man.
True.
Jake Asman's with us. He's up in Indianapolis, guys, here on ESPN and Mad Dog Radio. Keep it in Tampa. Baker Mayfield, are they going to keep him, or is he going to be out there?
I was listening to Jason Light's press conference earlier, and he made it sound like they want to keep Baker. They're going to do everything to keep Baker. I'd be surprised if they let him walk. Now, I don't know what his asking price is. I mean, does he view himself as a $40 million a year quarterback like Daniel Jones got from the Giants a couple of years ago? I don't know if Tampa wants to pay him that, but if there's a happy medium and for Baker to stay in a city and play for a franchise where he's clearly comfortable and found success, I think there's a deal to be made there. I'd be surprised if he's not a Tampa Bay Buck.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting. Tell me the most intriguing story for you at the Combine right now. Obviously, we got a full week and guys working out, but what are you most looking forward to seeing?
Obviously there's the quarterbacks. Everyone could talk to you about that, but I'm curious about the Brock Bowers hype. How high could a tight end go? And given what we've seen in the NFL with tight ends just emerging the last couple of years, does that maybe change the perception of, you can't take a tight end that high in the first round? Look at Kyle Pitts, as you guys obviously know in your city. But I am curious to see just how much hype there is around him. I mean, I had someone tell me that's a scout that his floor is George Kittle, his ceiling is Travis Kelce, and I'm like, okay, let's maybe calm down a little bit. But if that's how they feel, obviously you'd be on board with that for a top 10 pick. So I'm curious to see what his what his testing numbers are and just where the hype is with him, because you have these receivers who are unbelievable, Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze, and then Bowers might be like the next weapon people talk about. So I'm curious to see where he potentially could end up.
He's just a super athletic guy that just always finds a way to be open and always steps up in the biggest moments. Even when he was a freshman, Jake, he could have gone to the NFL and somebody would have picked him up. Hey, speaking of surprises, the rest of the quarterbacks, Bo Nix, first round, not first round. I mean, a lot of folks, because we're too close, we saw him be awful at Auburn. They look like a rock star out there in Oregon.
Right. Yeah, it's funny how that works, right? I've heard that there could be anywhere from 5 to 6 first-round QBs. Mike Tannenbaum told me on my Mad Dog show that he thinks there's going to be 6 guys going around one. I definitely see at least 4, maybe 5. 6 feels like a lot. I feel like McCarthy is going to play himself into being a first-round guy. So you have the big 3, J.J. McCarthy, maybe Penix, maybe Nix. I guess I could see it, but I'm kind of with you guys. I'm not as in love with Bo Nix as maybe others are.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, man. We certainly appreciate you stopping by. Enjoy the week, and we'll be paying attention to all the stories. Jake Asman, thanks for stopping by, man. ESPN Mad Dog Radio. We appreciate you.
Hey, my pleasure, guys. Thanks so much for having me.